In this lecture of the finite difference method, I will talk about a very popular approach which is called as the vorticity, which I'm going to denote by omega, and stream function approach or method, stream function, which I'm going to label by psi. So this is a popular approach for solution of 2D, two-dimensional Navier-Stokes equation and this is for incompressible flows. Note that vorticity is given as the curl of the velocity, and if you look at the governing equation in two-dimensional system, so if I say that the velocity vector u basically has components u and v because it's a two-dimensional flow, so clearly the curl of u will actually be in a direction which is perpendicular to u, which means that omega will just be omega k cap, where k is the unit vector along the, let's say, z direction, and u vector, which I can also write as u I cap plus v j cap, is the velocity vector resolved along the x and y coordinate or x or y axis. So the important thing to note is that there is only one component of vorticity in two-dimensional flows, and that makes it easier to set up the equations for this method. Further, the momentum equation, which I can write as du dt plus u dot del of u, which is minus 1 by rho gradient of p plus mu by rho del square u vector. So the momentum equation and the continuity equation, continuity being del dot u is 0, are the two equations in what we call as the primitive variables. The primitive variables being u, v and pressure. So what we'll do in this method is that we'll convert this equation or this set of equations into into equations in two variables, which are the vorticity and stream function, thereby reducing the number of equations from 3 to 2. Now, the way this method works, or to start it off, let me also say that because del dot u is 0, this is the continuity equation for an incompressible flow. Clearly in 2D, this is du dx plus dv dy is 0, so I can choose u to be d psi dy and v to be minus d psi dx, and that satisfies the continuity equation, and then psi is basically what we call as a stream function. Further, if I take the curl of the momentum equation, and this can be proved in many different ways, so I'm not going to go into the detailed proof of it, but if you take curl of du dt plus u dot del of u, which is minus 1 by rho gradient p, where rho is constant, plus mu by rho del square u, where again mu, which is the dynamic viscosity. So if you take the curl, it can be proved that, as I said, the vorticity will have actually only one component. So taking the curl of a velocity field, technically, which is in only two dimensions, will actually give me a equation in the third dimension. So we'll have an equation for vorticity, but with only one component. So this can actually be used to write the following equation. We'll have d omega dt plus u d omega dx plus v d omega dy is nu times d2 omega dx square plus d2 omega dy square. So this is the vorticity transport equation. This is the vorticity transport equation in 2 dimensions, which is of a parabolic nature. Note that the 1D form will actually lead to the Burger's equation, which we have already covered in this lecture series. So this is one equation that we will solve. An additional equation is obtained for or is required for obtaining the stream function, and because eventually we also need u and v in this equation, which are still not known. So what we can do is we can use the definition of vorticity. Note that the vorticity is in 2D flows will be dv dx minus du dy. So if I substitute for v minus d psi dx, so we'll have d by dx of minus d psi dx minus d by dy of d psi dy. What we get is omega will be minus of del square psi del x square plus del square psi del y square, or I can write that the Laplacian of psi is minus omega. So this will be the second equation, and this is the first equation that we will be solving using the finite difference method. So these are our new governing equations, and as you can see now there are only 2 equations which need to be solved as against 3. So we have an elliptic equation, this is an elliptic equation, and then we had a parabolic equation. So this Poisson equation and this vorticity transport equation can be solved in a sequential manner, and this will be the typical sequence. So the sequential operation will look something like this when we solve it using the finite difference method. So the first step will be to initialize omega and psi at, let's say, t0. So knowing the initial velocity field, we can always initialize omega and psi, or we can make a guess. Typically the initial condition is given. If you're solving a steady state problem, then we'll have to start with some initial guess. If you're solving a transient problem, then omega and psi or the velocity field will be given at t0, which can be used to calculate the initial values of these 2 variables. Now we can solve the vorticity transport equation, but at interior grid points only. For this will be for time step which is, let's say, n plus 1 delta t. So I would denote that as n plus 1 step using the usual terminology that we've been following. So why do we solve it for only interior grid points? Because we don't know the value of omega at the boundary. And in fact, if you recall from a little bit of fluid mechanics, omega is actually generated at, the vorticity is generated at the interface of a solid and a fluid, which is where the largest gradients exist between, in the velocity. So we solve it only in the interior grid points. The next step is, now that we have solved the vorticity transport equation, which is a transient equation, so basically we could do all these, calculate all these variables using an explicit formulation. So we get, let's say, omega at n plus 1. Then we use these interior values of vorticity to calculate psi. So now you can think that omega is known at the interior grid points. I would then use this known value of omega to calculate psi using this Poisson equation. So we solve the Poisson equation at all interior points using omega obtained in step 2, and this typically, because you can now imagine we are solving in a 2D system, so this will be will technically give you a pentadiagonal matrix. So we will solve this iteratively, either using the point by point Gauss-Seidel method or the line by line Gauss-Seidel method. The next step will be to find, once we have omega and psi, we can find u, which will be psi of y, and v, which is psi of minus of psi of x. Now using these u and v's, we can now determine the omega on boundaries using psi and omega values at interior points. So I'll discuss how do we do this, how we follow this step 5 in a later section. Then we can, if you're solving for a steady state problem, we can check for convergence. If not, we return to step 2. Meanwhile, if you're solving a transient problem, we just go to the next step, which is go to step 2 anyway and keep continuing until the duration of the until the total time duration for which the solution needs to be obtained has been exhausted. Now I will discuss an implementation of this method for a classical lid driven cavity flow problem. This is a very classical problem used for benchmarking many codes, and the problem goes something like this. We have a square cavity so we have a square enclosure which is bounded. The three walls here are stationary, so you can think of that's how we define a cavity. But the top surface has a plate which is moving to the right with some velocity, let's say u. It's a square cavity, so I will say that the height is h, which is the same as the width. The boundary conditions to this problem is very easy to see now, that the velocities components here are 0. Only on the top surface we have u to be u and v is 0, so it's an impermeable wall. The flow is typically defined in terms of the Reynolds number for the problem, and the Reynolds number here is defined in terms of the velocity of the plate, the height of the cavity or the dimension of the cavity versus the kinematic viscosity. And what we expect is that the flow patterns would look something like, you'll have a recirculation pattern being established in the cavity. It's easy to see why the direction will be such, or in this case, let's say in the clockwise direction, because the top wall, as it moves, and we're looking for a steady state solution, by the way. So when the top wall if it's moving, the fluid actually tends to get dragged along with it, and then because of the wall, it rolls down, and so we get this whole recirculation pattern established. More importantly, we also get some secondary recirculation zones established here. So we'll have one zone here which would be established, and then we'll have one zone here in the following way. If the Reynolds number was very high, you may actually even see a recirculation zone established here, but that is something that happens at typically Reynolds number of about 4,000 or 5,000, so we won't go there. So I'm not very concerned about this as of now. So the idea is to calculate this flow pattern. Now I've given you the essential steps of the algorithm. I'm going to now address how do we calculate vorticity on the wall. So the question that I'm going to address is how to calculate vorticity on the wall, because the rest of it is just very routine calculation. So to illustrate this, let me choose the boundaries and let me label the boundaries here so that I will refer to them as I go along in this discussion. So let's say this is boundary 1. Okay, let's say the right wall is boundary 2, this is boundary 3, and this is boundary 4. So I will refer to these boundaries one at a time and then show you how the boundary conditions can be implemented here. So let's start with boundary 1. So boundary 1 is this place where we have the vertical wall where u is 0, v is 0, and if I draw a grid there, so let me label the grid points as I comma j. We'll have I plus 1 comma j, I plus 2 comma j, and so forth at a particular elevation j. So this basically means this is the elevation j, and this is where I'm counting I. So what do we know on this left wall? What we know is that the velocity is 0. Both components are actually 0. So u is 0 would mean d psi dy is 0. But note that u is 0 at all points on this boundary. So this is 0 throughout. So this is 0 throughout along the length of this wall, which means there is no gradient of psi along y, so psi is a constant along y. So on this wall. Which means the second part is that velocity v is minus d psi dx. So this is also 0 on the wall, but only on the wall. It's not 0 as we move to the right. So now I will use Taylor series and use this information to calculate omega. So let me write psi I plus 1 j, which is psi ij plus, let's say, delta x being the spacing. So I can define this as delta x, d psi dx at I comma j plus delta x square by 2 d2 psi dx square I comma j plus order delta x cube terms and higher. Now note that I said d psi dx is 0 on the wall, so this goes to 0. That comes from this condition. And now what this gives me is that d2 psi dx square on the wall node or on the wall is given by 2 times psi I plus 1 j minus psi ij by delta x square plus an order delta x truncation term. So let me say that I'm only interested in the first order treatment at the boundary. So I will leave the higher order treatments to you. So you will see why I've only left it till here. You can develop higher order schemes quite easily knowing this, or following the same procedure. Now also note that omega ij at the wall would be minus d by dx of d psi dx at the wall, so I comma j, plus d by dy of d psi dy at I comma j. And now I can already see that d psi dy along this wall is always 0. So that means this way, this is going to go away, this is going to go to 0. So this is 0, and so what we get is that omega ij is only minus d2 psi dy square at this location. And now you can see why I wrote this Taylor series here, or I only wrote, sorry, I made a mistake here. So this should be d2 psi dx square, yeah. So now you can see that why I wrote this expansion for d2 psi dx square, because I anticipated that the vorticity at this wall will only be because of the second derivative with respect to x, not with second derivative with respect to y. So now I can write that omega ij will be minus 2 times psi I plus 1 j minus psi ij plus a truncation error of order delta x. So using this part of the picture, of the equation, I can now estimate vorticity on this wall. Now, one thing that you can also notice is, which I have not spoken about, but let me say this here itself. Note that the walls of this domain are actually impermeable. So there is no mass crossing across these boundaries in the direction perpendicular to these boundaries. So clearly this entire wall is actually a streamline, and so we can assign any constant value of psi along this wall, and that becomes the psi on that wall. So in this case, psi ij is essentially whatever value you want to assign. The exact value doesn't matter. You can assign it as 0, or you can assign it as some number, I don't know, 100 or 1000. That exact number won't matter, because the flow is governed by the difference in the stream function, not by the actual value. So the psi ij will be a number that you can assign to the problem. Now let's look at the right wall, and we'll follow a very similar process there. On the right wall, we will have, let's say, nodes in the following fashion. As I drew it there, we have ij, this will be I minus 1j, and the spacing is delta x. Velocity is 0 on this wall, and so I can use Taylor series. We can say psi I minus 1j is psi ij minus delta x d psi dx ij plus delta x square by 2 d2 psi dx square at ij plus an order delta x cube term. And now I note that this is 0 by the same argument, and then I can write omega ij will be 2 times psi ij minus psi I minus 1j by delta x plus truncation term of order delta x, where again I've used the same fact that d2 psi dx square will be minus omega. So we get this particular expression. The third would be, let's say, the bottom wall. So on the bottom wall, we again have u and v are 0. We can draw the grid points at this location. So this is ij. Now this will be ij plus 1. The grid spacing is delta y, and delta x and delta y need not be equal. So I'll write it in a general form. uv is 0 would mean that now in this case, note that since u is d psi dy and v is d psi dx, or v is minus d psi dx, and v is 0 throughout, that means psi is also a constant. The fact that I've already explained in the earlier part. So now we can write psi ij plus 1 to be psi ij plus delta y d psi dy at ij plus delta y square d2 psi dy square ij plus order delta y cube term. And now clearly this is 0, and we can write omega ij to be minus d by dx of d psi dx at ij plus d by dy of d psi dy at ij. And I note that in this particular problem, d psi dx is 0 throughout, and so omega ij becomes minus d2 psi dy square along this grid point, or along these series of grid points I comma j. So clearly that means I can now substitute from the Taylor series that this will be minus 2 by delta y square So I can use this series now to substitute what d2y dy square will be. So this will be minus 2 by delta y square psi ij plus 1 minus psi ij plus an order delta y truncation error. Now the most interesting part happens at the top wall, which is moving. Now you can note that as of now all these expressions look similar, and nowhere have I brought in any information about the moving wall. So far this velocity has not come as an input to this problem. So let me now show you how we can bring this into this problem using the definition of vorticity. So on the top wall, let's draw it again. So we have the top wall which is moving. So there is a velocity here, v is 0, the grid is ij, j minus 1, the spacing is delta y. So now I can write psi ij minus 1 to be psi ij minus delta y d psi dy at I comma j plus delta y square by 2 d2 psi dy square at ij plus an order delta y cube term. Now we cannot put d psi dy 0. So why do I say this? Now you note this, that u, which is d psi dy along this wall, is actually given as u, capital U. So I will now plug this in here. So we will have psi ij minus 1 to be psi ij minus delta y times u minus delta y square by 2, I should actually put a plus there, and d2 psi dy square will come out to be minus omega ij by the same arguments that we have been using so far, plus an order delta y cube term. And now omega ij on this wall node will be 2 times psi ij minus psi ij minus 1 by delta y square minus 2u by delta y plus a truncation error of order delta y. So the boundary vorticity at this boundary will be approximated by this expression. So this then completes the calculation of the vorticity on the boundary nodes, and now this vorticity can then be used to calculate to finish the calculation process for the particular time step or the iteration level, and then move on forward in time. Now note that this boundary value that we calculate will then be used in the algorithm. If you go back to this algorithm now, that once we have calculated if you look at steps 5 here, once we calculate omega on the boundaries, we then when we go to step 2 and we discretize our equation, especially the spatial discretization, right? We'll have spatial discretization here, which will bring at the node next to the boundary, we will need some boundary information to discretize this term. Similarly, we'll also need maybe in these derivatives, depending on what kind of differencing we use, forward or backward, we will use the boundary conditions. So the vorticity in the interiors will actually get modified based on the vorticity at the boundary. So that will basically be the way in which all this information from the boundary is going to be brought into the bulk of the domain. So this is how this vorticity stream function method works. In the next segment, in the next lecture, I will actually discuss one problem where this method can be used to solve an entrance flow problem, which is flow coming into a free stream flow coming into a channel. So what kind of flow patterns are created right at the entrance?